good friends with the CEO of AVI.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Recap with Mac. You got me muted?
No, I had to because you was unmuted and you were listening.
Oh, crap. Well, okay. Welcome to another episode of Recap with Mac for the week of April 20th through April 25th, where Mac Haddow, the Senior Fellow of Public Policy at the American Kratom Association, gives us weekly updates about what's going on in the kratom world. Welcome to the episode, Mac Haddow. What's going on?
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here with you, and I think this will be a fun time.
It always is.
Right.
It is. It really is. And people really enjoy watching these weekly recaps, Mac. They really do.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times people have reached out and been like, I'm so glad y'all started doing these. So thank you for spending time with us every week. I know you're a busy man.
I'll do it every week that I can.
Okay, yeah, super fun quiz says Mac Attack.
Mac Attack.
My kids call me that. So
do they really? That's cool.
Yeah, sometimes I've been on the attack with my kids. You know,
No.
Listen, one of the greatest things that I can recall about my experience with my kids, because I was tough as a dad. I had 4 girls and 2 boys, and I particularly wanted to be protective of the girls. And sometimes teenage girls aren't receptive to that. But I was invited to go to a lunch with one of my daughters and some of her high school friends from back in the day. And I was sitting there and they were talking, and one of the girls said, well, Mr. Haddow, I can tell you that we were deathly afraid of you when we were growing up. I thought, well, then I'm a great dad. There's no question about it. I wanted the boys to be deathly afraid of me, but at least I got partway there.
Okay, what I want to show, well, if you want to go over anything that's going on during the week, I kind of had to take a step back because I had an emergency happening in my home. So can you give us any updates that's gone on this week?
Sure. I think the good news side of this is that it appears that the governor in Kentucky is going to give us that 1-year reprieve from the enactment date, so that we're going to have until July 1st of 2027. I've not seen the final documents yet, but I've seen the documents that will be final. And I think this is what's going to happen unless something really crazy happens. The good news on that is that will give us a legislative session to go through and really have legislators understand the issues and what's going on. So that's good news. The other good news in Iowa is that we have a group of senators who at this point are standing firm and saying, we're not going to do this ban, despite the governor wanting the ban, despite the majority of the Republicans wanting a ban. We've got a group of 7 or 8 that are standing firm right now. They're at the end of their legislative session. They've got about a week left. It will be up on Monday, and they possibly could try to push it through. And these are the kinds of things that happen in the last week of a legislative session, sometimes in the last day, as we've learned, where mischief can occur. So we just have to do our best to kind of stay in line here. And advocates need to reach out to the Senate in Iowa. And hopefully we'll get our supporters standing firm, and that will stop the actual ban. The bad news side of this is that we have a governor in Tennessee that to date has not been willing to really adequately consider all of the things that we've talked about last week, where the deficiencies in the bill. The bill was founded on a lie to start with the so-called Matt Davenport legislation, because Matt Davenport didn't die from kratom. And we know that. And even Even his family admits it, that they're now saying, oh, it was a mixture and interaction with other drugs. There, what Matt Davenport died was not a therapeutic dose of Benadryl. It was multiple times higher.
Yeah.
And it indicates a different issue than taking prescription drugs and some interaction between that drug and kratom. It just doesn't pass the smell test. But the governor's not been willing to listen to that part of it. We hoped that he would be persuaded by what happened in terms of the fiscal note. Every legislature has an office that does evaluations of what the bills will cost. And sometimes they're bad. I mean, it just happens. This one is clearly wrong because they estimated the number of kratom users at a ridiculously low number using the tainted information from SAMHSA, which only looks at drug seekers and drug addicts that evaluate in terms of the number of people, their estimates. So they're looking at 1.7 nationally million, and it's actually, as we all know, 24 million. And so if you do the right math and you make the appropriate adjustments, you're talking about, instead of a $1.2 million impact, you're looking at that $20 million impact. And that's just on the loss of money from sales tax revenue and the increased expenditure from the prosecution and incarceration of people that will be trapped in this, the way that the bill is worded, into the criminal justice system. And so, and that doesn't even factor in the displacement that comes when an individual who is currently using kratom, this was identified by Dr. Joie back in 2018, that they will then be forced onto more dangerous, more addictive, and potentially deadly substances, and they end up in an addiction profile that puts us in a, that class of consumers in a real bind. And so treatment is the only thing that happens. And even with the adjustments on the federal side for what they call FMAP, which is the payments that are made by the federal government to support substance abuse treatments, it's still going to be hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that will be paid by the citizens of Tennessee because of this absolutely goofy policy driven by, one legislator who decided to make this her cause celeb, and everybody, kind of went along their merry way following. I don't think the governor's going to listen to us. We hope, fingers crossed, they will. But we've tried. We've talked to the chief of staff multiple times, several times this week, and it doesn't appear that we're making much headway there. But there's always the possibility, and we should continue to have outreach using email and phone calls to the governor's office. That certainly could help. We're in an equally dire situation in Kansas because we're right in a similar kind of situation where the governor is, more inclined to our position than not, but doesn't believe that she can sustain a veto. And the problem with that thinking is that sometimes you have to do it for the public policy. But we have plenty of evidence that will help, again, with the fiscal note impact on the citizens of Tennessee or Kansas. And so we could fight that battle once the veto is issued. But in Kansas, they really can't veto it. I mean, they've already gone out of session. And so I'm not sure why that argument. Certainly it applies in Tennessee. The governor could say, well, I'm going to get overridden anyway. In Kansas, we're in a better position. So I think the people that are telling us, oh, well, the governor is afraid of a veto override, I don't think it's possible. So Kansas is a different animal than Tennessee. So we're hoping that we can avoid that outcome.
Did the session end in Tennessee?
I was just about to say, yesterday was the last day.
Yeah, it's over. And now, but Tennessee can come back in an override session, the way I understand it. Kansas.
Okay, yeah.
So that's the issue is, and there's all, each state has a different process based on their constitution, but some states, a governor has, while they're in session, so many days to either sign or not sign a bill or just let it go into law without signature. And once the session's over, a different timetable triggers. So each state's different that way. But we're hopeful that the governor in Kansas will see through this and say, I don't have to worry about a veto. I'll do the right thing for public policy.
Yeah.
The argument that's been made is in Kansas is that it's difficult when the legislature passed one bill, which she's already signed. which bans 7-hydroxymetrogeny, right? There was a generalized reference to metrogeny, but it's not specific. And so the cleanup bill that they sent over to her includes a full ban on metrogeny. And our argument was that the procedures they use to do that violate their own internal procedural requirements, and it's going to potentially be subject to litigation. Why not just let this difference align with the federal policy? Let this difference between 7-OH and metrogeny be the predicate for further discussions in the next legislative session. So there's that. Now we've got some interesting people that are now advocating for the ban. Ty Masterson, who 3 years ago was an advocate for kratom, but he's now running for governor, I believe, and he's the Senate president. And I think that it's just really amazing that politics can kind of get in the middle of this, and this is what happens in this process. But we're doing our best, and hopefully we'll do well there.
Well, a lot of these governors, I know Bill Lee. This is his last year. Anybody from Tennessee? Y'all vote Monty Fritz. He's pro kratom. Monty Fritz. Get him in. Marsha, on the other hand, is not. But Monty is. I'm sorry, Dylan. He said that there was over 60 calls in one day in Kansas for support of the league. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, they told us that they're getting a lot of input, and that's great. Absolutely great. So those are the active states. I mean, we continue to have. We're watching some others. There's a bill that was just filed in North Carolina that added kratom to the hemp bill side of it. That bill is not going anywhere at this point. It's on a monitoring status, and so we'll see how that one develops. But there's nothing urgent about that state. South Carolina's winding down. The bills are moving back and forth in very procedural kinds of things. We're watching those closely as well. So, we're just going to keep fighting in South Carolina. But I think that the legislators get it about the difference between
completely.
And by the way, and I should have mentioned this earlier, we're seeing in states that the advocates really are responding. And Jen, what you mentioned, the number of calls and emails that the governor is getting in Kansas is evidence of that. So, I've said it before. My frustration is that when advocates within the kratom community, who are obviously for self-serving reasons, want to criticize the kratom community, they don't know what they're talking about. And I think it's unfortunate. And so I'm going to continue to be as strident as I can be, calling out those people who, for their own purposes, are, trying to say, oh, well, people need to get off their butts, and people need to, people aren't showing up. It's just not true. Now, there's always a circumstance where they'll call a hearing and you don't have time to get there. There's always the circumstance that in some hearings, the chair won't even listen to anyone, right? And so there's, it seems like there's no one there to speak to it. And there are certain situations where it's easy to say, well, no one showed up and no one told anybody in advance. And so
that's how it looked like in Tennessee, to the public. If you're not on the front lines, a lot of times, like, you're just, hearsay, or you're seeing what's on, whatever footage or whatever's on the internet. But I mean, there was a lot of people that showed up for Tennessee, but we didn't get a chance to speak, and we didn't get a chance to. But I mean, I think it's great. And like I said, I met a lot of great people, great advocates, and we're not done fighting yet. That's for sure.
Oh, sure. And then the other criticism that I hear from some of these people is that, well, we've got to educate these legislators. And, it's almost silly when you hear that.
Read what Dylan said.
Yep. And that's a fact, Jack.
Absolutely right. There's always something going on in these legislators, right? So legislatures, and the individual legislators will play whatever trick they can. And this is not so much about the education as it is about the manipulations that are deliberately used by kratom critics. I mean, we see it in Delaware. The ban bill got killed. And so this legislator came up with a creative way to get it refiled. Our bill is going to be fine. I mean, it needs to be amended a little bit, but the sponsor is willing to do that. We've had great conversations, and there's almost the assumption that lobbyists don't have any role in any of this, and that's pretty much what I heard clearly from the discussions with the 70H gals, where Robin Graham said, "Oh, we've got to educate." We educate through a couple of ways. We have policy people and lobbyists that are there working with these legislators and telling them, giving them the information. That's education, even though Robin likes to disparage it. But I think that's because she doesn't have any lobbyists. So she says, "Oh, well, the advocate's got to be educating." It would be impossible for an advocate to have the kind of time to be able to explain it and to understand, in some cases, the specific language and the provisions of a bill in order to properly negotiate. So, I think that's just the reality of it. We live in this community where we've got these critics. I mean, I listen to some of the, or not listen, I see some of the comments that are made in some of these Facebook groups. I mean, it's almost disconnected from reality.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
They churn and they keep saying, "Oh, the criticism of this," and
it's same like that over there on Reddit. They talk mad crap about the AKA,
Y'all
about
are
the
just shooting
AKA.
yourself in the foot.
In the
Look
foot.
at y'all. It's like,
It's because of the AKA that the 708 is on the bullseye, all this stuff. And
or they'll say, "Well, where was the AKA?" And it's like, did you watch any of it? Like, have you actually, are you in the same world as I am? Because like, they've been talking about it. Like, there's been emails sent out. They've been on, where are you at?
And they come after me like, "Well, the AKA should have been advocating for 708. Why? It does, like I said, it's not the Molested Molecule Association.
Right.
It's the American Kratom Association.
And they couldn't provide the safety profile. I mean, they couldn't provide the science.
Well, and I think that it would be very useful to go through the consumer alert before we leave today, because there's some really fabulous information. We put out a consumer alert yesterday on 70H, and it speaks to the heart of the issue for those people that are saying, "Oh, well, let's just let people decide what they want. We shouldn't be advocating against any bans. We didn't want the natural kratom leaf banned. Why are we trying to ban the 70H?" I mean, this is the kind of narrative that's developing. It is stimulated by the 70H crowd. This is their narrative. And people that repeat it, whether unwittingly or deliberately, are feeding this monster. And it is a monster in terms of why we're seeing this resistance, why we're seeing bans. There is only one reason, and that's 70H.
Yep.
And no defense. No one can speak with any authority or credibility and say, "Oh, 70H is not a problem." Of course it is. And I see it in every discussion we have with these legislators. They say, "We can't tell the difference. Tell me what 708 is." And I get these people coming in saying how 708 is great. And, it's at a national level too. The 708 manufacturers have bought a couple of think tanks in Washington. They sponsored a congressional briefing this past week. They had Ed Boyer and Kirsten Smith there. It might have been others. And they're pitching their narrative about 70H. And there's one piece of that's missing. Ed Boyer and Kirsten Smith can talk about the science behind 70H. They can't talk about the policy behind it because it's not their wheelhouse. I mean, the question is, did 70H have the sufficient science prior to market entry? Answer is no. And that's not in the wheelhouse of Kirsten Smith or Ed Boyer. They're scientists, and so they're going to talk about how does 708 hit your mu opioid receptors? What is the difference between a sublingual strip and a dissolvable tablet and natural leaf kratom? What is the effect when it hits your mu opioid receptors? Those are things that are absolutely need to be addressed. And when you do address them, then 708 goes away because there is no justification. But in this consumer alert, it will show why that's more true than ever, and why anyone who wants to advocate for 7OH, like the 7OH gals are doing openly, this blows it up. Because when you look at the testing that was done in this lawsuit that was filed against several 7OH manufacturers by the AG in Texas, look at the test results, and they are scary, because these are the groups they're defending. These are the groups saying, let's let them do whatever they want to do, and 7OH is helping me. I mean, you give me a break. We got to get a reality check, and it's hurting us. It's hurting us, and that's where
it's hard to help break somebody's reality whenever there's ulterior motives behind why they do what they do.
Yeah, I know. We all know, at least from my perspective, I get it that these people are well-intentioned for the most part. Some are not. Some are, deliberately because they have a self-interest in it. I get it that it's hard. It's like a family fight. You want to love your family, but sometimes your family's wrong. And, that's what we're in now with the core group of consumers. And it's, I want to be respectful, but I don't want them to attempt to use their position as a way to beat me back and say, well, don't tell the truth. I want to get along. So getting along is more important than knowing the truth. I mean, that doesn't work with me, and particularly dangerous for us in this community right now, because we have a real opportunity to make a difference at the national level as well. And we can't be letting this subterranean argument that 7OH is just great, and we shouldn't be advocating for bans and all of that, part of that narrative. And so when it comes down to a straight question, do we do this because it's the right thing to do, or do we just step back because we want to be friends? Well, you do the right thing, and that's the bottom line. And I think that's going to be part of the discussion. And these are painful discussions. I mean, I don't like having to call out some of the people that are on that side of it, because I think they are nice people. But you see what happens. So it's more than just a family fight. When Madeline Sklar says, and this just stuns me, because I disagreed with her, and she's articulating on her show the argument we were having, because she won't let me on their show anymore, and it's supposed to be an open discussion and all that, but I'm a lobbyist and I'm a bully. And then she says on her show, she said, well, could it be because we're women? And she puts her finger on her cheek. What? It's the Kratom Gal show. So in other words, any criticism that comes to the Kratom Gal show is therefore sexist. I'm sorry, you set it up that way. And if I can't disagree on some point, I shouldn't be subject to the accusation that I'm somehow the sexist for just disagreeing. But that's cute,
I've seen the people in the Reddit community, the 7OH community, call you sexist and misogynistic and, all this stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I'm a freaking female. Yeah. I have took the time to build a relationship up with Mac for 6 years now.
Yeah.
Somewhere along that line,
I can tell right away when somebody's misogynistic, or when somebody's surrounded by women in their life. And you could, because my husband, all of his sisters, he's got 3 sisters. So it's you can tell when people are around women, and I can tell you've been around women for a long time. So I don't know, people just like to make up things.
It's got nothing to do with female, male, they, thems, nothing like that. It's right and wrong. That's it.
Yeah.
Amen. And they know it, by the way. This is just it's the way to have the food fight, to try to by themselves and all that. And that's, that's just too bad. But it'd be hard to sell the argument that I'm this so-called sexist when you talk to Senator Mike McKell, who thinks I'm his mortal enemy. And by the way, I'm close. And then I made a list of I think I came up with 30 men in the Kratom manufacturing community that I've had fights with. And it's not because they're men. It's because they're wrong on the issue. So, now that doesn't mean I'm right all the time. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that when we retreat back to these arguments that, you're a sexist or you're a bully, this makes no sense, because it's not advancing a true discussion. And the bottom line on all of this was, they wouldn't let me on their show, but I invited all of them to come on to an open webinar and say, everybody can ask whatever questions they want, no restraints, just get on and let's have the discussion, because this is about how do we protect the Kratom community. That's what
The
it's
greater good. Like,
Yeah.
we're protecting the greater good, not
Yeah.
just a handful of our
leaf.
friends.
The
you know?
leaf. How do
Yeah.
we protect the leaf? And because, us as advocates, we've been following the legislation. We've been following the pattern of legislation. And, like I said, it really beefed up after the FDA, DEA, HHS press conference last year in July 29th, 2025. That's when all this legislation stuff started popping off like crazy, And that's why I could say that we've attended, watched, or live streamed, up to 300 hearings. That has never happened in my almost 7 years of being in the community.
exactly.
And you can
So-
be pro pain management, but when you do, like what she said, she said she was pro pain management, but not pro 70H. But she stopped watching after when you're talking about using 70H and you're deeming it as something that's not very harmful, that's advocating for it. And
because your friends take it.
Yeah, and it normalizes it. And
Yes.
normalization of this product when it's being used right now, today, as a weapon against natural kratom leaf consumers. And when you hear the FDA commissioner be as strong as he is about the difference between these substances, and when he and I know we're going to talk about what happened in Suffolk County, which was fabulous, by the way, in terms of the advocates. Those advocates got off their butts and actually were out there. I don't know, always there, but they were fabulous. And you hear these stories, and I heard them in South Carolina, where the chairman actually gave the time to these advocates to actually speak and tell their stories. Now, they were limited to 3 minutes in Suffolk, but down South Carolina, they had more time. When you hear their stories, it's like fabulous. And that message is getting through and it's resonating. And that's where we need to be. And so I think that's really important. But when you hear some of these so-called experts that show up and they want to say, oh, well, I'm a clinician, I'm treating these patients. There's a video that's up that Dean Francis from End Kratom Addiction is playing from the Betty Ford Clinic. And it's very much like what happens with the Mayo Clinic, right? During the battle in Utah, Senator McKell, Utah State Senator McKell, on a radio interview that I was on with him, he said the Mayo Clinic's done some really good research on kratom. They haven't done one thing they've repeated what the FDA says. And by the way, now it's outdated what they've been saying about the FDA. I hope they'll catch up. But the Betty Ford Clinic is an addiction recovery center. The reality that's happening in America today, because of the reduction in the number of people who are suffering from opioid addictions and overdoses, by the way, you see a shrinking population and therefore not so much money being made by addiction recovery centers. And now the new thing is kratom. Oh, we're seeing this flood of patients that come in that are kratom addicted. And we have to just automatically slap them on Suboxone, put them into the medical treatment program, and guarantee they'll be there, by the way, for a year and a half, because now they're hooked on Suboxone. And is exactly what Dr. Joie said should not happen. That when you trade that kind of a kratom, so-called kratom use dependence or kratom disorder, they play the game and they get them sucked into it. And now here we are in this situation where you hear it across the country. These addiction recovery centers get up there and they act like they are the angels of mercy. They're here to protect the addicts and the consumers. There's no addiction profile in kratom that requires the kind of medically assisted treatment that they are using appropriately, by the way, for opioids. Opioids aren't bad, by the way. Opioids need to be properly prescribed. They've turned the spigot way down way too low in that area, but that's because of people that are at the federal level, like Kolodny and others. that are really creating a mess. But the bottom line is that opioids are appropriate for certain kinds of pain management. They should not be restricted in the way that they currently are. But when it comes to addressing how you treat people that are suffering from what they have self-defined now as kratom use disorder, it is unethical for them to come in and start treating them with Suboxone and other kinds of alternative medical therapies when the director of NIDA says you don't need that. 10 days, you walk away. Now, you hear what these so-called experts are saying, but the Betty Ford Clinic said, so therefore God must have adorned it, blessed it, and anointed it for us to be now involved in it. What a crock. And, at some point we just say, okay, prove it. Just prove it. And that's where we ultimately will be.
What they're doing is they're conflating, once again, kratom with 7-OH. I can see Suboxone working, and it has worked for a lot of my followers across all my social medias, where Suboxone will help somebody get off of 7-OH, but then they eventually taper off of the Suboxone. They don't get hook, line, and sinker, for 10 years, 20 years, So I could see 7-OH or Suboxone working for 7-OH, but what Betty Ford and whatever other, I have lost so much respect for the addiction recovery industry.
I have for many careers.
Oh my gosh, But I always say putting someone on Suboxone for kratom use disorder is like shooting a squirrel with an elephant gun. You are putting somebody on an opioid to get off of a food. Yeah. Do they do that for coffee? Do they do that for cheese addiction?
They do not.
And they're not like they're asked. I've seen a couple of them say, "Oh, 7-OH kratom."
Yeah,
so it's like they're not even differentiating it at all. So if they come in and say it's 7-OH, it's 7-OH kratom. It's just I hate 7-OH.
Well, I'll tell you, I learned something 2 days ago that stunned me. It was my belief that the first entry of 7-OH products into the marketplace occurred in August or September of 2025. And I think that's absolutely
2023.
Thank you, 23. I think that's true in terms of the actual commercialization of a product that was designated as 7-OH. But I saw some data 2 days ago that showed that 7-OH was popping up in some products in 2021. Now, the reason that's important is that it changes the discussion about when you see the data that comes in about, 7-OH is still just as addictive if it's in a masked product that was not commercially designated as 7-OH. Still has the same properties. Now, it was not, as I was able to determine, it was not in the product formulations like sublingual strips or chewable tablets. These are, the pill forms that go through your first pass metabolism that create all the problems that 7-OH creates because it hits the liver like a freight train. And then you hear this completely absurd argument that's made by Michelle Ross, who says, oh, well, generally speaking, she says something that's true is that 7-OH is converted in your body when you ingest kratom. Absolutely true, right? But then, of course, what she then follows up with is not true, and that is, oh, well, it's at the same proportional levels. If you concentrate 7-OH in the naturally occurring form, I think the number they use is a 23% conversion of metrogenine into 7-OH. So that sounds good. Percentages, that's a horrible thing. Well, the truth, most of that 7-OH is excreted because of the way the liver handles and defends the body and processes it. And so that's where we are. And as we push through on this, so Michelle Ross is saying things that are just plain, unsupported by the science, but she wants to defend her boss, right? And her bosses are these 7-OH cartels that are out there distributing these products. And so she has to defend them. But she can't sit there and say, oh, well, I'm a scientist and therefore you can believe me. And she says, I'm the most expert 7-OH scientist in the country, in the world. Now, I don't think she said world yet, but said in the country. Well, I'm sorry, Michelle, show me the peer-reviewed published article that you have been a participant in about the safety of 7-OH products.
But she
Because
did a study, a survey from 1,100 7-OH people, and they answered questions, and so that's her big,
right,
you know.
yeah, that's the foundation, but it's not a peer-reviewed published.
Right. But
She
I can't stand that. It's like she has like this research paper, like just some really important. And it's like, bro, you took 1,100 people that signed up on the internet and answered a bunch of questions. You don't even know who they were.
From Reddit of all
Yeah,
places.
from Reddit, exactly.
Reddit is like the sewage of the internet. You know,
it is, but you know, if they identify, there's nothing wrong with identifying, you know, a subject for a survey, wherever it comes, as long as they're legitimate in terms of, you know, they are Kratom consumer or they're a 7-OH consumer, and they've had, you know, some experience with it. I'm not going to demonize people because they happen to populate the whack job places in Reddit. They can be there and be legitimate people. And I'm not going to criticize Michelle Ross for reaching out and trying to gather it. But do not sit there and say, I'm the most preeminent 7-OH scientist in the world because I did a survey of self-reported 7-OH consumers. Until it has been reviewed and the methodology for that study has been vetted by other scientists so that you could get an actual peer-reviewed published article. I mean, they don't even, this is the truth. You can go and get a peer-reviewed published article published within about 2 weeks. You just have to pay, right? So they could do that. They don't even have good enough data that would pass muster with some of these schlock journals that will just, because even that's not very good enough for them. So I think
they're paying a lot of good money for these new hit hit pieces that are coming out about 7-OH. You could pay to get the freaking journal.
Yeah, it's just the way it is. I think it's true. Someone just commented that not everybody's bad on.
Yeah, they're not.
I agree, and I also agree that not everyone who is a listener to the 7-OH Gals podcast is a bad person. I also don't think that the people that are on that panel are necessarily bad people, but they are people who have been deceived. They have been easily sucked into the 7-OH narrative, and now they're articulating it. And when I sit there and listen to them and say, oh, well, I don't, for example, Robin Graham says, well, at BAE, we do not endorse 7-OH, but we're not going to say it should be banned because we're not into that. Well, if you're protecting a Kratom consumer, you sure as heck ought to be saying it should be banned because it is the biggest threat to the continued consumer accessibility of natural leaf Kratom products. That's the bottom line.
I'm going to say if you got off your butt and watched these legislation hearings, you would have a different outlook on what saying that we don't want it banned.
Yeah. And
it's
about the truth. And I'm not making it personal. It just happens to be the person that said it. And she happens to be wrong and happens to be self-serving because she wants to, say, oh, the AK is bad. You need to come over and be a part of our group. And some people have gotten into that. The truth is that you can have a small group of people that you're able to do a lot more with in terms of hand holding, having discussions and all that. And I wish that we had more time to do that. But that's not a reason to then characterize yourself as the saviors of the Kratom community. None of us, the AKA's not, the GKC's not, the Botanics for Better Health and Wellness are not. We are part of a community. And this idea that they want to point their fingers and say, oh, the AK is terrible and all that. I mean, it's almost laughable, but they do it with a serious intent in order to try to sell that they are somehow superior. And I think that's disappointing because what it does is divide. They sit there and say, well, we think the community is too divided. And they're the ones
we have to be. Well, we have to be.
Well,
there's no
H issue we have to be, but they're acting like we're too divided in the actual group. And so I'm going to answer this question by Adam in just a second. We don't want to divide the legitimate 7-OH natural leaf Kratom community, and that's what they're doing. and by
Yeah.
using this surrogate as saying we shouldn't be going after the 7-OH. So there, let me answer Adam's question. And there's a little spin to this. Personally, I have not bought into, up until now, the theory that many have held, and my apologies for in my mind thinking maybe they don't understand what they're talking about, of saying big pharma's behind all of this. That's been something that I've not personally bought into, because I fundamentally believed that the reason that you do not see the kind of research projects that would start into a new drug application is solely because there's no ability to patent natural leaf kratom. So if you are a drug company and you want to seize that marketplace, you've got to create such a tweaked molecule that it's almost unrecognizable, because otherwise, why someone will just go out and buy the natural leaf kratom product, get the effect that they have, and there's no return on investment. But there is a study that is being conducted in Kansas. It's not, my understanding is it's not blessed by the government there in any way. This is a sponsor, which would be a pharma company, who wants to do a clinical trial, just happens to be in Kansas. And so I think that that's an interesting revelation, because that shows you big pharma has gotten, somebody in the pharma community has gotten an interest in this and thinks that they can navigate into making it into a very powerful and strong prescription medication. And that, there's a threat that's associated with that in terms of people thinking, well, I'll just go buy the prescription medication when it gets on the market. That's a long pathway, but it's there. So there is a clinical trial study that's being done. It'd be interesting to watch and see how that plays out, because we know what the barrier has been up to this point for pharma companies getting into this space. But it's true that they'll chase a dollar wherever they can find it. And I think that that there's a possibility that they're looking at the 7-OH. I've not seen the actual construct of what that product is. It might be based on 7-OH as opposed to naturally kratom, but we'll see how that works. And we're going to watch it very closely, obviously, because there's an interesting law that's on the books that it's the race to market provision of DSHEA, which says that if you have a clinical trial that's ongoing for a dietary supplement, the dietary supplement cannot be marketed. Now, that doesn't apply, in our judgment, to kratom because of the long-standing consumer use of kratom that goes back decades and decades here in the United States, since the early 70s. But it would be a legal argument that we would have to watch very closely to make sure that we don't get that race to market provision isn't invoked, and they get to block the natural leaf kratom products from being on the market. Doesn't appear that is going to fly, but it's what it is as we go forward here.
So Tracy Hudson's asking, can't the federal government ban kratom from the market so big pharma can develop drugs with it? Well,
yes, if they had a scientific basis to do it. And we saw if what happened in 2016 and then repeated in 18, had they been successful, they would, by banning kratom, that would have opened the floodgates for new drug application research on kratom, no question, because kratom works, because kratom helps people, because it has a therapeutic benefit for those that use it. Not that you can market it that way as a dietary supplement or a botanical supplement, but consumers can use it for that purpose. So obviously there'd be a market for it. Right now, we're just sort of stuck in this. We are a botanical supplement. We believe, but for the DSHEA Act and the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, which allows for the FDA career staff to define kratom as an unapproved dietary ingredient or dietary supplement, and therefore can call any products that are on the market today, because they are not approved as those things, as a adulterated product. Okay, that's a very interesting position, because what the law actually says is that you can, as a kratom manufacturer, submit to the FDA a new dietary ingredient notification, NDIN. And when you do that, it's a 75-day process. Now, that can be elongated if there's objection letters that are filed, which typically occur, that there's a reasonable back and forth. So so the bottom line that you have with that situation with an NDIN is you amass the information that you believe justifies the safety of your product to be on the market, and it's euphemistically called the IT. So you define what your product is. You define it specifically. You say, this is my product formulation. This is what the contents are, and you submit it and usually it's a couple $1 million to develop a good package because you have to have some scientific data behind it, which includes some testing and clinical work. Then the FDA has 75 days to raise an objection, and then there's a discussion between the applicant and the FDA. And at the end of that 75 days, the applicant has the absolute right to go onto the market. Okay, the FDA does not approve it. The FDA does not deny it. It simply raises their objections. Then, if you are the manufacturer and you've gone through that 75-day process, you can go on the market, and the FDA, it is their burden. If they believe that that product is unsafe, it's their burden to take it off the market. So they have to take an enforcement action against you. So there's been one enforcement action taken in 2015 under the NDIN process for a kratom-derived product. One. And since then, there have been multiple NDINs with no enforcement actions taken. So it is the FDA's webpage is being mischaracterized, and in fact is wrong in the way that they word it, because they're treating it as there's no approved medical use, right? There's no process to approve a dietary supplement or dietary ingredient. So that's why we need to have that language changed, because it is misinformed, misled, and created disasters for us in states like California, in Minnesota, Michigan, New Mexico, any of these states that are using the FDA and Kratom webpage as the basis for them overlaying their state food laws to say that that Kratom is not legal for sale. It is, and so it's interesting. We need to keep fighting.
So, in other words, are you saying that the NDINs that were not approved is basically the FDA given a de facto approval?
Okay, the word approval can't be in this. There is no approval mechanism for the FDA. They do not approve, and they do not deny a NDIN. They adjudicate it. So
okay,
you submit, and then they raise objections. And the purpose of that is for the FDA to have the opportunity to evaluate what the scientific data that you have presented as a basis for safety for you to go on the market. Then if you can't resolve the issues with the FDA, which most, well, I don't know for sure one of them, most of them had objections raised, then they go on the market. Mm-hmm. And when they go on the market, the FDA has one obligation. If they truly can justify, it's called a de novo basis. So for each individual case, they have to take the company to court. Mm-hmm. They have to shut them down, take them to court, and they have to win in that case. So you have an FDA that has accepted and processed NDINs, and you have one action taken in 2015 that was done under that process. There was a second issue with the feel-free products in Oklahoma, where the FDA called it an adulterated product, and they might have in that complaint referenced it as a DSHEA violation, but they also were talking about it being adulterated for the raw material coming in. They only evaluated the metrogeny part of it. But what happened in that case? They withdrew the FDA withdrew the case. So yeah. To the extent that the FDA has appropriate authority to act in these cases, the manufacturers have the same ability to appropriately use the process in order to get kratom products on the marketplace, and they have done it. And so when I hear these California regulators, for example, about a week ago, I was lectured to say, well, there's been no FDA approval of a kratom product for any medicinal use. And I said, do you understand what the DSHEA Act is? Well, of course I understand what the DSHEA. Well, then why don't you act like it? Because you know that a kratom product can submit to an NDIN. Well, but there's no approval. I said, well, again, you're using the wrong word. There is no approval mechanism under DSHEA. None. It's just an application that's submitted. It is processed by the FDA, and then the company has the choice to go on the market. And so just accept that that's just the reality of the current marketplace. And it's the language in that FDA and Kratom webpage needs to be changed because it materially misleads public health officials around the country. And if you don't know the nuances of the law, you don't even know to make this argument. And even when you make the argument, you've got very experienced and I would say capable public health officials that disregard it because they see those words, no approved medical use. Well, that requires a new drug application. If you want to make a therapeutic claim, you damn well better back it up with a new drug application with all the scientific data that's associated with that.
My argument all the time is the vitamins on the grocery store counter are not approved by the FDA. We give those vitamins to our kids. There's a melatonin craze, and parents give their toddlers melatonin. That's not approved by the FDA.
You could walk into an NC store or any similarly situated dietary supplement store. There are hundreds of products that have never been approved by the FDA. With one qualifier, there are some step down over-the-counter products that were drugs before, and now they've been approved by those have been approved by the FDA for OTC status because they had to do a step down from usually in the potency of the product, but sometimes just in the labeling. Once the generalized use has been proven to be safe, so a company can go over the counter, as opposed to having generic competition in there if they remain as a new drug process. So anyway, it's very complex, but its complexity is based on the companies that are interacting with the regulatory process. It's not about consumers. Consumers have the right to have access to safely formulated, properly regulated products. And the FDA is getting in the way of that right now. And we need to clear that up as best we can.
So do you think, you know what? I dare a 7-OH manufacturer to file an NDIN. I dare them to, because they have no scientific data to back that up. And you know what? It still irks me today is that people will still share the 2019 one.
Yep.
That Dr. Jack Henningfield did. And they use that as their argument for the 7-OH products on the market today.
So Michelle Ross uses that argument. She said the 7-OH has been evaluated twice by the DEA. The twice means that trace amounts of 7-OH in naturally occurring kratom leaves that's been catalyzed in the drying process has been evaluated at the trace amounts. Nobody has evaluated the high concentrations of 7-OH in the products that are on the market today. So if I can I flip to this consumer alert for just a second?
Yeah.
So everybody should go on our website and find it.
Do you want to bring it up, Misty?
You can bring it up on the.
Hold on.
Do you want me to bring it up on the thing?
Yes.
Okay, let me go grab it.
Yeah,
I actually have it at my tab open for it because I shared it around last night. Okay.
And this is going to be great, by the way, when you see it. If Misty could just get it.
I'm getting there. I don't know. Okay, there it goes.
Okay, good. So we need to get the actual alert, not the press release. So
where the heck did you put the alert?
Well, come on. Don't ask me technical questions. Go to the AmericanKratom.org website.
Okay. Let me get on over there. Are you pulling it up, Jen?
Yeah,
I hear you typing.
And we're going to rebuild our website to make it more consumer friendly, by the way, because we've gotten over the years, we put stuff up there, some of it's outdated. We need to do better. And we're going to do that.
Hiding in plain sight?
No.
Okay.
You go to the AmericanKratom.org website.
Okay.
And then I'll do it while I can guide you through.
I've got it. Hold on, let me share the screen.
Okay. I know that whenever you go to the press release part on the AKA website, it's not in numerical order.
I know. So you want to go to at the top there should be go under science, go to releases, Click the first thing up, view official release.
Ooh, there it is.
All right. So
I'm going to be sharing that one then.
absolutely. Go down about 3 or 4 pages. I'll tell you when to stop. So this is research, the methodology described. These are tests that were done by the Attorney General in the state of Texas using the University of Florida labs that Chris McCurdy runs. So they go down to the next page. They looked at the content of products that they purchased on the marketplace. So here's 7 ohms. 7 ohms represents that this product's been on the market from the get-go from the September of 2023 at least. So they claim that it's 7.5 milligrams of 7-OH in this product. It has 12.84 milligrams of 7-OH per tablet. Okay. It has, and this is stunning, 1.52 milligrams of pseudodoxil. And that's far more powerful than 7-OH.
Yeah.
And of course, the standard is you can have no greater than 2% of the overall fraction of the content of the product in the Texas law. This has 86%. 2% to 86%. Stunning. So that's on the 7 ohms product. Go to the next one. Just scroll down.
7 ohms is who funds Seven Hope Alliance.
I know. And now you have Luma. Luma has no 7-OH in it.
Oh,
What?
No.
what?
It has 42.17 milligrams of pseudodoxil. It is a knock you on your rear end opioid, full-blown opioid. And they're selling it as a 7-OH nano shot. So clearly that one's crazy. Then you go down to the next one. This is Smurfs, which, by the way, Michelle Ross will say is no longer being sold. That is a complete nonsense. Of course it's being sold. When she said it in California, I went home 2 days later and I ordered all these products and I got them shipped to the American Kratom Association offices. So look at this one. Smurfs has 38.45 milligrams per tablet of 7-OH. It has 0.83 milligrams of pseudodoxil. 95% of the total alkaloid content of Smurfs. Of course, that's for you and I, our inner child, and every kid in America, by the way, to be marketing that way. And of course, Michelle Ross says, "Oh, we're not selling those anymore."
You know what they did at Champs? They hired a bunch of little people and they painted them blue and had them going around. They had the little people going around handing out free samples. They were dressed like little Smurfs and Smurfettes.
Yeah, and of course, we're not selling those anymore. We're not selling the confectionery ice cream cones, and we're not selling the sublingual strips, and we're not selling the dissolvable tablets. All of that is a lie. Mm-hmm. Absolute lie, but they get away with it, right? Because they got people like Michelle Ross saying, "Oh, it's not true." You know, we've had all this testing done, all that. So here's Opia. Again, you see the same problem. 96% of that product is 7-OH, 16.14 milligrams per tablet, and includes pseudodoxil. Pseudodoxil at these levels would get you whacked at the FDA if you had them in a kratom product.
So people are unknowingly taking pseudodoxil and they think that they're taking a 7-OH tablet.
Absolutely. And so this is what's stunning, that they want to get away with coming up and saying, "Oh, well, this is..." Now you see that they've moved away from, most of them, calling them kratom, because now they've captured a marketplace. They know that they're under strong heat for that. And so these are not kratom. And that's our whole point in this press release. These are not kratom products. They shouldn't be viewed that way. And we've got to find a way to separate in the eyes of any public health official that they can't conflate the two together. Because when you see what the CDC report came out, and in the headline, the sensationalized headline, it sounded like they were talking about kratom, but then they differentiated it later, where they said, you know, the advent of these spikes in these reports are really amazing in terms of the correlation to 7-OH on the market. Look at this one, Press D, 7.56 milligrams of 7-OH and 8.80 milligrams of pseudodoxil.
Oh my word!
That is amazing.
So
And
they're
these
not
are
even accurate on what they're saying is in these things
they're
because
mislabeled. What they want is to get a consumer taking their product, and if you've got a 8.80 milligram
Mhm.
pseudodoxil product and you're taking that, you're addicted right away, and you're
Yeah,
coming
I've
back.
heard the pseudoindoxil's worse.
it is
Yeah,
worse. Yeah,
magnitudes worse. And then of course we get into the total chemical formulations with these MGM or MG 15 and 16, but there's also now metrogenine 8, 10, 12, 18. I think they're doing the same thing that happened in the spice industry and the cannabis industry. So I think this is craziness.
so they're bastardizing it even more now.
Sure, all all to get a person who buys it and consumes it hooked.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's what they're about. And it's stunning that they get away with now. Thank goodness that Attorney General Paxton has called them out, because this is serious stuff. This is a complaint that was filed against two companies, and they purchased these products, and they're going to continue to increase the number of prosecutions against these companies, because these are, by any standard, dangerous products being sold in the state of Texas, that have now been verified to not only violate the Texas law. And by the way, this is really interesting. They say, all of these companies, I think most of the companies, if not all, say that we will not ship into a state where our products are banned. They say it right on their websites. And someone from Texas orders it and gets it, and it's banned in the state of Texas on the 2% standard.
it's like the same crap that's happening in Georgia. You know, Georgia's cap limit is way lower than the other KCPA states, but you know they're having the problems. They're they're selling it under the table, under the counter. You know, that's what
Yeah.
someone from Georgia told me.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there will be a black market on all of these products, no matter what we do, and it's going to be sold from out of the back room or from a secret place under the counter. We have to deal with that on an enforcement basis. I just had a conversation with a guy in Rhode Island who was asking, how can we get rid of those bad guys? There are two ways to enforce. Well, there are a couple of ways to enforce, but one is what Attorney General Paxton has done, and the Attorney General of Missouri is doing. They're going after these companies, so that's important. And
Good.
go out and do secret shopper stuff, and they do what the AG did, is they ordered them online, and they got them. They also purchased them in the state of Texas, in some stores too. Second way is that you get consumer reports. Someone buys one of these products, and they go home and they take it, and it does exactly what it's intended to do, but not expected by the consumer and not welcomed by the consumer. So you get a consumer complaint. That's another effective enforcement mechanism. And if they report it, then we can get after these people. And then the third way is that, and this is just the way that life is, competitors report on each other. And they'll go out and do their own surveys and secret shoppers, and then they'll report them. That's fine. That it's just the way it is along the way. And someone makes the case here that you don't get immediately addicted. That's probably an overstatement. But what you do get is, if you take pseudodoxil or 7-OH, doesn't matter, and it gives you that binding affinity on your mu opioid receptors, which goes to the euphoric high center of your brain. And what you get is a very fast, very quick high, euphoric high.
You're going to be thinking about it after it wears
Mhm.
off. I mean, that may not be full blown addiction, but you're going to be like,
The people that have looked at this, and even Ed Boyer said to me, in regard to his testimony up in the state of Michigan, he said that sublingual strips and these chewable tablets, dissolving tablets, should not be sold, because they do exactly what we just described. Give you a fast euphoric high, you crash, you crave it, you're back on it, you're addicted very, very quickly. So thanks for calling me out.
Speaking of,
Yeah.
Speaking of Michigan, I saw a couple commenters ask about that. So the video that Cam Cabot recently put out is Dana Pope, her son Ethan Pope. They're from Georgia, So I could connect the dots on where Cam Cabot is getting his people, so that he could try to make it seem like his decision to ban kratom in the state of Michigan is worthy, But can you give us an update about Michigan?
So the as we've talked about before, the Michigan speaker with the school marm teacher who was rapping his knuckles with a ruler forced him to convene his little you have to be in your seats and we're going to push it out. That happened, and Speaker Hall is not his approach to this was not welcome in the Senate, and the Senate now has right now. And this all can change. Right now, it's in a committee where it's going to die. The speaker has been told by the majority leader in the legislature that they do not favor his bill. And so there's that tension. And some of it's because of personality, some of it's because of procedures, and some of it's because of whether the issue itself is being appropriately handled with a ban. And so we're trying to work in unison with all those arguments to beat back a ban in Michigan. I think we're good there, but we want to continue to push our consumer advocacy efforts in the state of Michigan. So I think that's really good if people just keep, feeding information to the Senate in order to keep Michigan under control. In Minnesota, we had what I call our two-step process. We got the first 21 and up ban. You can't sell it under 21. That was important because currently the Department of Agriculture in the state of Minnesota has bought into the FDA and Kratom webpage, and now you have the legislature clearly and definitively saying Kratom can be sold, just not someone under 21. Then we have a commitment from the sponsor to come back in the next legislative session, and we'll do the more robust regulatory scheme. Some of it was timing, and some of it was just the posturing of some of the health officials in the state of Minnesota that we had to deal with. And we just ran out of time with the crossover dates in their legislature. But anyway, great news out of Minnesota, and we're really on a good track there.
Do you want any? They're asking anything we can do to help Michigan's bill die.
Well, you want to send messages to every senator saying regulate kratom, don't ban it. That's the bottom line. And
so protectkratom.org/Michigan.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I spelled that.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I'm mainly on TikTok. TikTok is my biggest platform, and then I'm here on YouTube, and then I'm on X, and then I'm on LinkedIn. I got banned on Facebook, and I got banned on Instagram.
Yep.
So yeah, shame on me for being such a loud and proud advocate. Oh my goodness.
Exactly right.
So did you watch the whole 5 hours of folk hearing?
No.
Okay.
Talk about a marathon.
I my good friend Dr. Kolodny.
Oh.
Did you watch it?
Yeah, and it made me so sick I had to go to bed.
Because I wanted to play it for you, and then I want to hear your thoughts on it. You down for that?
Absolutely.
Okay, because Kolodny, you know what?
I've been conditioned now, and I won't pass out.
And then, did you watch little Kolodny's buddy later on in the hearing?
I didn't. I had to.
He brought his whole crew. He brought a lot of folks with him.
Of course he does, and he's well. We can talk about it because he's a person that is so compromised in terms of his what he's doing.
Absolutely.
Just a repeat of the nonsense that he's been involved in the opioid community for years, and he's trying to do the same thing. It's a cash cow to him. He wants to be an expert witness and make millions on these cases. He wants to be out there establishing himself as a so-called expert on this. He is anything but. And I had a direct interaction with him at the International Conference on Kratom down in the University of Florida, and he was bizarre, and he lied to me. If what he said during that hearing is true, because he told me he wasn't treating patients anymore. And then he's sitting there talking, well, I get in my practice, I get all these kratom patients. What a joke. I mean,
I can't. I'm waiting for the doctor patient forum for us to finally do our like an interview type thing, because I want to go over and talk about what Kolodny said to me, how he cornered me. He freaking cornered me at that symposium. Yeah. I was just, yes, I smoke cigarettes. I was outside just minding my business, smoking my cigarette, and here comes the little old dude, coming sitting next to me, trying to ask me all these questions, trying to corner me into my answers. So whenever Claudia and them get back because right now they're in Atlanta doing the Doctor Patient Forum event. But whenever we get that scheduled and get done, like, I can't wait for that to come out.
Yeah, y'all gonna hear if there are saints in the world, and I know there are some, Claudia and Bev are there. I mean,
agreed.
They're fabulous people, and I'm just telling you, it is to have that kind of advocacy, not from people that are kratom advocates.
Those are pain patient advocates.
Right.
That's a great example of a pain patient advocate.
Yes.
And you know what? I'm seeing the parallels happening because, Kolodny went on his, egotistical rampage to get opioids cut because of the people that were abusing opioids like myself. And now today's chronic pain patients aren't allowed to get opioids. Like you said, the spigot was turned down or whatever analogy you said. I see it happening now with in the kratom space. The 7-OH, the people that are abusing 7-OH, people that are addicted to 7-OH are ruining kratom. So I'm and like I said, yes, I've always accepted my accountability for my abuse. It's
still completely different though, because
it is.
7-OH is not kratom, so it's like, but I get what you're saying, and you have always accepted accountability, but that's such a bigger thing. Like, it's not just the people that misused it. It's a lot.
Yeah,
it's just like such a small percentage. But
so because throughout the years of my advocacy, I've had pain patients blame me for their reason why, and I've always just said it's like population control. And the same thing can be said about 7-OH being mass produced to the public without any scientific data, that they are used as a science experiment. It is about population control. They created the supply so that they can they created the demand so that they can supply it.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
That's exactly what these 7-OH I don't even want to call them manufacturers. Like you said earlier, cartels. These 7-OH cartels.
Well, and part of the support for that is when I was in Thailand a couple of months ago at the conference on kratom there, the Minister of Justice told me that he had shut down 6 factories of 7-OH in Thailand. He said that 4 of them were really fronted up by the Chinese and the Cambodian investors, and that one was a U.S.-based manufacturer, and one was a joint venture they couldn't really identify that was serving what they called the global market. They shut them down. If you are manufacturing 7-OH products and it goes to China and then China ships it into the United States, that's a cartel. And they want to cover themselves. And here's the core argument that, and I hear these people say, oh, well, we should just let people be and you do what they want to do and use what they want to use, and we shouldn't interfere with 7-OH being on the market. What are they talking about? I mean, would you want something that's deadly sitting on the market? Would you say we don't fix that? Do you want, and certainly that if you extended that argument, you would say that heroin and morphine and LSD on the market. So do you want something that's highly addictive, that is potentially dangerous, that is a full-blown opioid, completely unrestricted on the market? The argument that they're making benefits the 7-OH cartel. It does not benefit patients or users or consumers. None of that. And yet they want to act like it does because they're libertarians and they say, let's just let people do what they want to do. No. At some point you draw a line and you say, I'm not putting up with that.
You have to have morals. You have to have standards as a human being. It's, right. And that's just that.
Like I've said this millions of times, I don't care what you put in your body. But if what you're putting in your body is threatening what I put in my body, that's where I go on attack. No, you ain't my friend. No, go on. You want to keep on doing that? Go ahead. But just know that you are contributing to kratom's downfall.
Mhm.
Yes. So I think I'm prepared now to talk about Chladni because
Okay. Let me go grab it.
Heidi said, I had a robust discussion with him, I guess during the symposium.
Well,
I would have paid to see that.
means.
What'd you say?
Heidi's gonna have to define what robust means. I had a robust conversation with him too.
Yeah, he attacked you multiple times, Mac.
I know. And
Okay.
I felt beat up, and I felt like, man, he's so mean.
But you know what?
I
Oh my
hate
God, Mac.
This one right here, the whole banning 7-OH because it's killing people. I'm not saying because of that. I'm saying because it's ruining people's lives other ways than just killing them, man.
Yeah, absolutely right. Amen.
Oh, the same person.
That's all I'm going to say about that because you already got me. We
already went after you on our last live stream. You know what? Yeah,
we ain't 7-OH friendly over here.
Yeah, go ahead, keep calling me a bitch.
7-OH got 7-0 got to go.
Yeah, like I said, it's in my damn username. The T-Bish.
7-0 got to go.
There you go.
Go hang out with your 7-OHers. Skedaddle. Okay, let me put that on screen. You gotta add it on screen. There you go. Let me go fix it. Okay, let's watch colonoscopy.
I love how you call him that.
My name is Dr. Andrew Chladni. I'm a physician. My specialty is treating opioid addiction. I practice here in Suffolk County. I've been involved in efforts to address the opioid crisis for more than 25 years, as a public health official, as a researcher, as a clinician, and as an advocate. I'm here to support legislation to ban the sale of kratom because I have seen firsthand how kratom sold in Suffolk County is harming residents. Kratom is widely marketed as natural, safe for pain, anxiety, even for addiction. But that marketing is deeply misleading. The FDA has warned consumers for more than a decade against using kratom, against using all kratom products, citing risks of severe liver disease, seizures, addiction, and death. After studying kratom, the FDA concluded that compounds in kratom, including mitragynine and 7-hydroxymitragynine, are opioids. That is why, with daily use, there is tolerance, requiring higher doses for the same effect, and dependence, meaning that people will feel sick when they try and stop taking kratom if they've been using it daily. Some people believe that kratom is helping them because when they take their first dose in the morning, they feel relief. They feel less pain, less anxiety. They say they can get up and walk the dog. But what they're really experiencing is the relief of the withdrawal symptoms from kratom, not the relief of an underlying problem. And for the people who believe that it's benefiting them, they may feel that way today, but we don't know tomorrow whether or not they'll experience liver failure, a seizure, heavy metal poisoning, addiction. We are now seeing the public health consequences of an opioid, kratom, being sold over the counter. For the past decade, calls to poison control centers and hospitalizations involving kratom across the United States have increased 1,200%. I'm seeing this here in Suffolk in my patients who come into the hospital and experience severe withdrawal from kratom, no different from the withdrawal people would experience when they stop heroin. My colleagues in other parts of New York State and in other parts of the country are seeing the same thing. Some are arguing that the problem is limited to 7-hydroxy. That is not true. The 7-hydroxy products have only been on the market for the past 2 years. Problems including deaths and addiction from kratom have been rising rapidly for the past 10 years. Some argue that kratom is an answer to the opioid crisis. That is also not true. If it were true, states that have total bans on kratom would be doing worse.
Sir, I'm sorry, your time is up, but if anyone has any questions for the doctor.
I've got some.
Thank you, sir. Oh, Legislator Kennedy.
Thank you for coming out today to speak on this. I'm a nurse for 30 years who worked with substance abuse people and teenagers who used many different things. So my question comes from experience and from reading. I'm going to make a statement and you tell me if I'm on the right track, because I am confused by the studies, and it doesn't just depend on who wrote the studies, which is unusual for me. We know close to what an amount of leaf kratom chemical is safe. Is that true, or is that not?
That is not true. There was a study done to determine what dose of mitragynine could make somebody ill, but we really don't know what's safe. What we know is that the FDA says that nobody should be using any of the kratom products.
Okay.
And the distinction between mitragynine and the 7-hydroxy products, which we've heard referred to as synthetics, to be precise, they're not synthetic. They're semi-synthetic because you actually make them out of kratom leaf.
Okay.
It's not like the synthetic cannabinoids, which are just made out of chemicals. So it's oxidation of kratom leaf that can result in 7-hydroxy.
Okay. Now, if we are to vote to keep the kratom leaf and not to change the bill and not the 708, is it possible that the small amount that's in the individual leaves could be altered the same way marijuana is? We say now it's not your mother's marijuana. It's much stronger. It's been, worked to increase the levels of the psychoactive drug.
The answer to your question is yes, because 7-hydroxy is not the only potent opioid that you can make from mitragynine. There are other potent opioids that you can make out of kratom leaf, which means that we'll be back here again in a couple of years talking about another opioid that comes out of kratom.
He's freaking lying.
That's also potent.
Does he talk like
But
that in real
just
life?
to respond to the previous testimony, if someone were to drink multiple tinctures or extracts of kratom leaf product, of really a large dose of mitragynine, I don't think they would just feel nauseous. There's a very good chance it would poison them. Mitragynine toxicity can be lethal. It can lead to cardiac death and to respiratory depression.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Minority Leader.
Just if you could submit those studies to us through the clerk or through the chair, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Sure, will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none. Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah. So
there is a in the court system, you can file when an expert witness is testifying during a court proceeding. You can file what's called a Daubert motion. We should be filing Daubert motions on Kolodny with the Suffolk County legislators, because what that does, it says this guy's talking way out of his expertise. He's using assumptions that aren't scientifically grounded. So we ought to use that, because Kolodny has been subject to Daubert motions when he testified on the opioid thing multiple times. So let's just drag him into this and say, this is behavior he has exhibited before in courts of law. He has been sanctioned by judges under the Daubert motions for exceeding the expertise that he currently has, right? That's the truth. And he, just another sidebar, he was censured by 2 publications that he authored and had published because he failed to disclose the financial interest that he had in the opioid battle. 2 of them. And I confronted him with that down in Florida, and he admitted to it. And, he said, well, yeah, whatever. So his credibility with respect to being an expert in these areas, it certainly comes into question. But the very things he was saying throughout that testimony is so grossly distorted and not grounded in good science. He pretends to be this expert, and it's nonsense. And so, we need to pull it apart. He published an article in I think it's called the Consensus thing.
The conversation.
Thank you. I just sent them a rebuttal piece this morning, challenging everything that he was saying in there, because we cannot allow him to get traction with these false statements. He's using the same playbook that he used during the opioid crisis. He just is now converting it to kratom. He's looking, obviously, to become this so-called expert on trials, where you have, obviously product liability trials that are going on by a group of predatory trial attorneys that are just trying to make a buck. And now they're going to drag in people like him. So he's looking for that opportunity because he can make a ton of money on those kinds of deals. And he really does not have the expertise that he's claiming to have, and his experience in terms of understanding what a actual kratom consumer experiences in their consumption of a real kratom product, a natural leaf kratom product. So it just something. Heidi just asked who can submit it. In the court system, the lawyers all do that. Here, I'm just saying we play on that, and we cite the fact. We go to the legislature, in this case Suffolk County, and say, we're filing a Daubert motion that if we were in court, because the assumption is he's telling them the truth. The assumption is he's under oath, right? And so I'm just saying, let's use that as a way to play on what happens in court and draw to the experience that he personally has had in court, where he's been challenged by the lawyers and sanctioned by a judge for being outside of the lane of expertise that he purported to have in a court. And if he did it there, if he did it in a courtroom, he's doing it in front of legislatures where there's less restrictions on him in terms of what he's doing. And that's the premise that I think we attack his credibility, that this is just a repeat of the kind of behavior that he exhibited while he became that great advocate to get rid of all opioids in America. And I think that Claudia and Bev are right that he lied and people died.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? It was like divine intervention for me to be able to go to that symposium in February in Florida, because
you text me and you said that. I was like, shut up.
Because so Dr. Heidi was there with us as well, because normally you guys don't have advocates there, right? It's just like industry people, the legislatures and all that stuff that go there. But for Laura Romney and Dr. Heidi and I and Melody Wolf, just advocates, right? And we sat there and listened to all the presentations for those 4 days, 3 days, 4 days, something like that. And Kolodny was there as well. So the fact that us loud and proud advocates were there, we get to counter argue what Kolodny is saying.
And he's full of doo-doo.
He is. They never once said kratom is an opioid at that presentation, at those presentations at all.
Because it's not.
It's not.
And he wants to sit there and say, as though he's some kind of expert, that kratom is an opioid, and you have true experts in the field that say, no, it is not. I mean, Jack Kenningfield, Chris McCurdy, the list goes on. Kratom's not an opioid. It doesn't have the characteristics legally or pharmacologically to be classified as an opioid. And yet he just throws it out there. Hey, I'm an expert. My name is Dr. Kolodny, and I'm an expert. And so you can believe me when I say that kratom is an opioid. It is not. And so that's part of our.
And then him talking about, so like we heard, like Dr. Nora Volkow did say, all you have to do is taper 10 days.
Right.
And you'll be done with kratom. And for him to see, like someone said in the comments, that he's purposely putting out these powerful words out there. He's trying to change the public perception by him stating that kratom is an opioid. Then that will in fact allow him in his practice, his supposed practice, because he hasn't practiced in a long time, him and his little buddies that were in the audience, it will allow them to prescribe Suboxone.
Right.
And the way that they get away with prescribing people Suboxone to get off of whole leaf kratom is they put down opioid use disorder. That's what they charge. That's what they code for the insurance companies.
That's the money.
So exactly.
That's where it lives. Now, I talked to Kolodny at the Florida conference after he had heard Dr. Volko, and he repeated what his interpretation of what Dr. Volko had said. It was not even grounded in the least bit of reality. And I challenged him and I said, let's go talk to her now, because he was saying the same thing. Oh, well, she said that it takes a real treatment program, could extend for years. I said, you're in a different universe. That's not what she said. Let's go talk to her. Well, I'll talk to her personally, because he wants to hide. And then he walks away, goes up to Suffolk County and other places and testifies, oh, kratom is an opioid. And, he's not grounded in reality. We need to bring him back to reality. And I think part of that is a process where you discredit him in statements that are not grounded in science. He just throws them out there, stealing the actual credibility that most scientists have that follow in their lane. Like when you do a peer-reviewed published article, you understand that you have to disclose your financial interest, which is something that's foreign to him because he didn't do it twice and got sanctioned for it. That's the kind of thing. And he sits in a court of law and they get Dauber motions on him that stick because the judge rules on it. It's something. So we need to call it out. Just say, this is a guy who is, I don't know what he's taken, but he's taken something because it ain't grounded in reality here. So let's just figure out what planet he's on right now.
Oh, man. I can't wait to have that conversation about him with Claudia, because he made some comments about he had dental work or something done, but he didn't want to take the pain medicine because he didn't want to get addicted. Like, seriously?
Get out of here, man.
Man.
He probably did, though.
I don't know.
Does he talk like that in real life? Just real?
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Yeah. That's how he talks, like he's a little meek gerbil or something.
He's all docile.
Yeah.
Yeah. He can Daniel Patrick Moynihan said it right, and I repeat this often. People are entitled to their own opinions. They're not entitled to have their own set of facts. And he's making this up as he flies because he's learned from his experience in the opioid world that he can get rich by saying things that feed the monster. In this case, the monster it was opioids there. Now it's going to be, I'm anti-kratom. I'm going to keep riding that horse. And it's our obligation to call him out. And we're going to do it. This is going to be a project that every time he opens his mouth and says something, we're calling him for it. And we're going to do it in Suffolk. Everywhere he shows up. He's going to be in Boston when they have. And so we need to really pack the room just like we did in Suffolk. To make sure that the city council in Boston hears the truth, not the filtered nonsense that Kolodny is slinging just because he thinks he can get away with it. And then have the aura of, oh, well, I'm with Brandeis University and therefore I'm smart. It's that's
you can called. You can still lie.
Yeah. Isn't that called bleeding the beast? I know I heard that saying somewhere.
Yeah. I like it. I don't know, but I like it.
Yeah. Okay. So is there any final thoughts?
So one thing I would say is that we've got two challenges in front of us here. One is that we have to have the courage to stand up against even those within our own group that are simply living in a different universe. Bring them back. Let's send rescue squads for them. Let's make sure that they understand that, we'll bring them back into the fold, but they got to stop the nonsense. And that nonsense is being peddled by 7-OH advocates who are relying upon being able to dupe the community into thinking, let's just let's live and let live. No, the absolute threat to the continued availability of natural leaf kratom products relies upon our getting rid of 7-OH, because I don't want to sit in another hearing and listen to the director of the TBI in Tennessee say, I can't tell the difference. I can't test the difference. And we wouldn't even be having that conversation if 7-OH were properly classified as a Schedule 1 substance. So that's going to be the significant thing that will change, hopefully this week, where the DEA schedules 7-OH.
Oh, come on with it. I am so
I
ready.
know.
I am
Like,
so ready.
I know.
Adam wants to know if there's any updates in Ohio, Nevada, and I think Delaware was mentioned also. But yeah, he did go over Iowa in the very beginning, if you go back and watch the replay.
Yeah, and Delaware, we're okay there. It's a battle. I mean, we obviously fight these battles. The ban bill sponsor refiled her bill and using some trick. I don't think that we're gonna obviously aggressively push back. In Nevada, we are in the position where the Board of Pharmacy will convene a formal hearing to schedule kratom, and when they go through that process, that we're going to have to fight. It will, if the Board of Pharmacy agrees to schedule it, which I think they will, based on their attitude. I mean, they were like lemmings in terms of getting to a vote. The legislature will evaluate that. So this is something, and I'm not going to discount the power of having that hearing and them hearing the truth. So maybe that will get enough of them on the right side. We'll see. But that's one we're going to watch carefully. And it's a fight. This is a battle. And what we can't be distracted in, and assuming that by the time they get to that hearing that the DA will have acted, we can at least have a clear playing field to describe the safety profile of natural leaf kratom products that are defined by the FDA. That study that Senator Mike McKell from Utah said was industry funded, but was actually funded by the Food and Drug Administration. And I'm sorry, Mr. McKell, you don't know what you're talking about. That guy. We want to get that playing field cleared so that there's not a lot. There'll still be some confusion because the 7-OH people are going to be, they'll go crazy when they ban, but they know it's coming and what they're doing. And I'll bet you a dime to a dollar, they're already in the next stage of product development that's going to call it be something else. So therefore it's not covered by the 7-OH ban because they know that the DEA, the objection that they have raised and the reason it's taken them this long, and hopefully the resolution has been there, is that they have no basis to schedule under the criteria required by the Controlled Substances Act for these follow-on synthetics. They can't even get to pseudodoxil. They can't even get to the MG 15 and 16. So they're going to have to deal with those later. And these guys who came on the market in the first place with 7-OH, they're going to be out with something new. And it's going to be a new chemical formulation, and just expect it. But at least you're going to have a consumer population that's more aware because of the, this so-called, 7-OH is great. It's on the marketplace. It is just not true that 7-OH is the benign substance that they're claiming that it is. And look at their marketing. Everything is about, we should sell it only in smoke shops because that's where their clientele goes. And when you take it, what is their message? It's a therapeutic benefit. It's not about how kratom can just help you manage your life, reduce anxiety, give you an energy boost, increase focus. None of that. It's, everybody should be sold there because they know that the majority of kratom consumers in America will not go into a smoke shop in order to purchase a kratom product. Some will, but not all of them. And they know that preserves and protects their marketplace. And we need to just eradicate that with a federal scheduling as best we can.
So you're saying that the DEA announcement won't include the derivatives?
Can't.
It's only focused on one.
Right. They're going to try. So when that happens, this is my opinion, when that happens, then our next challenge will be federally through legislation to reach those synthetics and have it banned from a statute, not under the Controlled Substances Act. The legislature has the right to go in and ban those products. So that'll be our focus once we get the 7-OH ban that is memorialized in a scheduling designation.
Oh, God.
Always a battle.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be, done. wiped your hands. 7OH gone. You know, man. So, you know what?
We'll get there one day.
Just stop calling it kratom.
Amen.
Just stop calling it kratom. I swear.
Stacey, he did go over Kentucky if you go to the beginning of the replay, but the governor is gonna, it looks like he's going to agree to make the ban go into effect next year, 2020, well, gosh,
July 1st,
2027.
2027. Yeah.
July 1st, 2027.
Correct.
I know Dylan. He's like, ugh, why is this so hard? If it's synthetic or semi-synthetic, it's banned. They've done it tons of states with cannabis and all the deltas.
Not hard.
It's not hard, but I mean, I don't know. It's like technical stuff.
Because supply are part of the food supply. FDA does not approve products with kratom because supply are part of the food supply.
I don't even know what you're talking about, Adam. You spoke about Deshay. I thought the FDA does not approve products like kratom because supply are part. What? You are what? Are you okay, Adam?
No, I understand that this is confusing because of the way that we think of the FDA's authority. For drugs, they have to approve them, affirmatively approve them. Deshay, they do not. The only thing that happens in the Deshay Act is that they go through an NDIN process, New Dietary Ingredient Notification process, that they get to evaluate and raise objections to the manufacturer. And then the manufacturer has to respond. And if the response is not to the liking of the FDA, when the manufacturer places their product on the market, 75 days after the submittal, it could get extended if they start negotiating, but 75 days, if the FDA doesn't like it, then they can take it off the market, take enforcement action. And they haven't done it other than the circumstances that I referenced.
Caitlin is asking, what is the other stuff y'all are talking about, the other derivatives? So, you know, it goes 7OH, and then pseudoindoxyl, and then MGM15, MGM16, and then Mac talked about ones I hadn't even heard about before.
These are the metrogenine 8, 10, 12, 16, and 18 that we've seen so far. And they're going to try to make them into kratom, but they are chemically manipulated products.
Are they all manipulated from 7OH?
Yes.
Like I know pseudoindoxyl comes from 7OH, so it's
all from 7OH. So an additional clarification on the Deshay Act, when you get into a position as a company that you want to submit to the FDA your application for an NDIN, if you were on the market prior to October 15th of 1994, when the bill was passed, you are grandfathered in. Okay. Now there is a specific criteria that is used for products that were on the market, and the FDA has argued that the kratom did not meet the criteria. You have to produce evidence. Some of that evidence for other substances has been global use in the diet. Now the slam dunk, right? We know that for kratom. Some of it, now that's a court case that allowed that. And so the precedent is there. Arguably it could go to court and they could hash it out. But we have evidence that kratom was used in the United States. What they are trying to say, what they have, the FDA said, well, it's not sufficient to have affidavits from people who say that they imported kratom into the United States and resold it. That's not sufficient. We need to see
receipts.
And of course, who has them?
Yeah.
They specifically made the argument in 2015 that you need to show us that there is a bill of lading from the company or the group that shipped it. They're non-existent because what happened in the mid 1990s was you had the advent of sophisticated software systems that came on the market that allowed for the tracking of those kinds of things. Other than that, people kept them in a drawer, and then as soon as a year or two passed, they tossed them, because who wants to store irrelevant documents, not knowing that those documents could be very relevant once the FDA started their nonsense. So you have this artificial deadline of October 15th of 1994. Anything before that, we have plenty of evidence. Peter Hutt, who was the chief counsel at the FDA, is a world-renowned FDA attorney, told me that the application for the NDIN using the data for natural leaf products was a slam dunk to be grandfathered. And the only products that needed an NDIN at that point were those that were extract products that had to be evaluated for the concentration of the extract, which therefore had to go through an NDIN. That was his view of it. And yet a former FDA general counsel who's been deeply involved in the DSHEA Act and the way it's administered, the FDA said no, turned down the company that he was representing and said, no, we don't agree. None of it is grandfathered in. So this has just been a battle between the career staff at the FDA. And remember that the whole purpose of the DSHEA Act was to resolve the long-standing conflict between the FDA and the dietary supplement industry. Up until 1994, starting in the mid-50s through 1994, the FDA tried over and over again to ban all dietary supplements, claiming that they killed people, claiming that they were adulterated. Does this sound familiar? They had a label, and they wanted all of them to either be removed from the market or, in the alternative, remove them from the market until they were able to submit a new drug application. And a new drug application, by the way, requires about a $3 to $5 billion investment, and you have to be in the long haul for 5 to 10 years of an evaluation. Now it's getting shorter now with AI and that kind of thing, but that's the reality of the world. And so the Congress finally said enough, and it passed unanimously in 1994, which is unheard of in the Congress, as we all know. But even back in those days, when it was a little more collegial, it passed unanimously, and it slapped the FDA. And I remember sitting in the House hearing room, and the chairman of the House committee had invited Senator Hatch to come over. It was his bill to testify on the bill, and David Kessler was sitting to testify as well. He was the FDA commissioner. He was adamantly opposed to the DSHEA Act, and he was angry. And he, by the way, used to work for Hatch. So they were friends, and I used to work for Hatch, and I knew him, and so I'm thinking that this could be at least a reasonable discussion. When they gave Hatch the courtesy of testifying first, which for some reason made David Kessler mad, and then they had a vote called, so they suspended the hearing, and we walked out into the hallway, and Kessler, knowing the inevitability of passage, said to Senator Hatch, "Well, you can pass this, Orrin, but you're going to kill people with these dietary supplements, and I will not enforce it at the FDA." I mean, just blatantly told him.
Wow.
And they got into this back and forth discussion. The gist of it was that David Kessler said, "We believe that this industry, with this new bill that you are proposing, will implode on itself because they won't be able to constrain themselves. They won't follow the rules. And we're going to have 10 years from now," he actually said a shorter period of time, "we're going to have bodies on the street and we'll be able to repeal this." He said, "But we're not going to enforce it." And they didn't. They didn't enforce the DSHEA Act for 5 to 8 years. Finally, they waved the white flag and said it's working. The industry didn't implode on itself. They acted responsibly for the most part. They're always bad actors. And you had a well-developed dietary supplement industry that was much better than prior to the 94 Act. But the FDA at the time hated it. Now, is the DSHEA Act perfect? No, it was forged in a compromise. And so if we wanted to go back and fix it, I would like to, because the complication of what the actual NDIN process I described to you is not a very airtight system. I could see some ways to fix that, but nobody wants to do it because you have a $100 to $200 million industry that is solely in organic products, and then you go over $1 billion in dietary supplements that you don't want a disruption. And so the advocates for the protectors of the DSHEA Act in the dietary supplement space are saying, nobody touch this. So
Yeah.
What
imperfections of it.
What products were popular back then to make the DSHEA Act go into enforced or going.
Yeah, largely what you see in the marketplace, when you walk into a dietary supplement store, you'll see a whole array of various herbs and products that are naturally derived, that and then vitamins and vitamin derivatives. I mean, you have some product formulations from products that have to be obviously mixed and developed to be marketed. So that whole array of those products and the claims that were made about deaths were largely unsubstantiated, but there were some because of badly formulated. There were no standards, and so people were making bad products and dangerous products. So the DSHEA Act was critically needed, but the issue was not that the substances that were being controlled were dangerous. It was the way in which they were formulated and the way that they were marketed. That was the key, the two key elements. And America and consumers in America are better off for having passed the DSHEA Act. But if the FDA, I would have said this 2 years ago, if I'm not sure it's so true today, if the FDA had their way, they would repeal the DSHEA Act and force everybody to go back through the new drug application process. I don't think that the FDA is in that position today with the leadership of Commissioner McCary. I don't think it is in that position with Bobby Kennedy, Secretary of HHS, but and I don't think it is with the president. So right now, so I think there's a better environment, and certainly you saw the evidence of that when you see what they did with ibogaine and obviously the use of psychedelics in order to help people, veterans with PTSD. That wouldn't have happened. The adjustment to the scheduling of marijuana, that would have happened in other presidents. So there's a better environment for us to operate in the kratom community than we've had in a long time. Not perfect, but still there. You've still got the career staff at FDA that continues to be a problem. So, you know,
the career staff at the FDA that are grandfathered in.
yeah.
Set in their ways, because what I remember happening in the 90s, because I was a teenager then, showing my age here.
So was I.
Was that whole ephedra thing.
Yeah.
So somebody needs to find their grandma's checkbook, their old checkbook, because back when I used to write checks, I used to save my checkbooks.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to go find their grandma or grandpa's checkbook and see if they purchased kratom before October 15th, 1994.
Right, but the FDA wouldn't accept it. That's the problem. We found an advertisement which is the gold standard, and unfortunately, it said K. It was clearly a kratom product out of a company in Kansas City. We found it, and it was an advertisement. And we went to try to find the owner of the company, and he's in the wind, so that we could get an affidavit saying that was kratom. And so enough ambiguity in this is K, and even though the advertisement clearly showed it was a kratom product, the FDA said no. And they're the arbiters of it. Now, that the only solution to this in the big picture is for the DEA to schedule 7OH, which we think is going to happen, that we get Congress to put parameters around product formulations so that we block all of these other synthetic, semi-synthetic, chemically concocted products, and then as they are out there in the black market, let the DEA develop the evidence that's necessary to actually schedule them as well. And let's have a kratom consumer marketplace that doesn't get greedy. It doesn't look for the high. It doesn't, and there are some people that are part of the problem that are in the kratom community. It's just one of those things that we have to deal with and have to be mature about. And we're gonna make some people in our community ticked off at us. But hey, welcome to the club, because we're there now, and need to find the right space to protect the majority of the natural leaf kratom product consumers, and not protect the companies, because the companies have to behave. They have to produce products that are properly formulated and safely formulated. But for consumers, we have to behave too and say, we're not going to get sucked into these 7OHs, and we're not going to play the game of chasing a high. That's something we just have to deal with.
If somebody gets mad at me for standing up for what I believe is right and my morals, Who cares? That's what
I
I
don't
say
care.
about it.
You're
I
being
don't.
sexist right now. And
Oh,
you're being a bully. Come on.
Keith, I'll be 47 on May 12th. So yeah, I'm showing my age here. You know what? Talking about chasing, I haven't taken kratom 6 days this week. I didn't take any kratom. If there was a high to kratom, there would be no way that I wouldn't take any for
Right.
6 days.
But absolutely right, and that's the stigma that that Kolodny tries to put on kratom and kratom consumers is so grossly irresponsible. It's not even funny. But why does he do it? Because of the almighty dollar.
The money.
And he's trying to find it, and we need to cut him off at the pass.
He wants to make his $725 an hour as an expert witness.
Yeah, well, he made millions as a witness, and it's interesting that when I talked to him, he said to me, he said, "Why are you talking to me like I'm an advocate for Suboxone? I'm not." He said, "I'm not doing that," and yet he's quoted in an article years ago where he was describing that as a public health official in New York, that he was deploying his staff to go around the city and tell people to use Suboxone. And you tell me how this works. He was offering $10,000 per physician to do it. Now, where was he getting that money? Is he trying to tell us the taxpayers paid that? Of course not. That was paid for. That is the tactic used by the pharma companies in order to get doctors to prescribe their products. And he actually described the people that work for him as drug reps, acting as drug reps. Now, how can he sit there with a straight face and say, "I'm not involved with Suboxone"?
Is that coming from the opioid abatement money? The settlement monies?
Well, no, I don't think so. I don't know for sure, but I don't think so because there was no. I don't think the lawsuits have been adjudicated at that point. This is very early.
Oh, okay.
So I think he was just out there, saying doing exactly what he said. My people were drug reps, and they're promoting Suboxone. But the point is, when it's convenient, and maybe he thinks I won't check, he says, "I have nothing to do with Suboxone." How can you say that? Acts all offended. And I'm sitting there feeling sorry for him. "Oh, I'm sorry I said something like that that you're a Suboxone dealer." I mean, come on. And yet he is. I mean, he certainly promoted it. He certainly is an advocate for the benefits that Suboxone provides to people that he thinks are addicted. And if naloxone won't help you with natural leaf kratom, Suboxone won't either, because they're at the same level of the opioid receptors. So, I mean, the key here is accurate information, calling him out, pull the Dauber motion on him in Suffolk County. We're going to do that, and discredit him because of what he says. Discredit the claims he's making, which are not scientifically justified, and put him on the defensive appropriately to explain why he would say something like that. Why in the world would you go overboard just because you want to advocate for one position?
That one representative, that one guy, I cannot pronounce his name, but he was up there and he was doing saying these statements that were just amazing. And he made that statement of Suffolk County received $90 million of the pretty much the opioid settlement monies. So I'm thinking that Kolodny is wanting to get his little hooks into that by calling kratom an opioid, because when you do that, like I said, it changes the public perception and it allows them to bill the insurance companies for opioid use disorder.
Yeah, really interesting point there. I mean, he in the past, Kolodny, worked as a consultant to local communities like Suffolk County and helped them design their applications to get opioid settlement money. So maybe he wants to include kratom as an opioid to do exactly that. I don't know.
Yeah.
They weren't a part of the lawsuit and not part of the funding of that. But anyway, very interesting point. But bottom line is, this is a guy who will say and do anything in order to promote a narrative that is made up It's out of his own mind. It's not based on facts. It's not based on science. We know that. And he says it as though it's just a slough. It's so clear that kratom is an opioid. Like, who says that? You say it. Show me somebody else that says it that's credible, and show us the evidence that that's true. And he was not going to be able to do that.
Like I said, we were at the symposium. We heard the same stuff he heard. So what he walked away, he didn't learn jack crap.
So he's obviously your friend, not mine. So
Yeah.
smack him in the head.
Nobody wants to claim that guy.
His husband.
There you go.
Okay, well, we can wrap this up. I really got to go pee.
Yeah, I do too.
Not gonna lie.
Thank you so much again, Mac. We appreciate it.
No, glad to. Thank you for all that you're doing for the community. This is important.
Hopefully we'll see you next Saturday.
I hope so too.
Bye,
Okay.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.